Hello? All right, I got the buttons for the microphones figured out. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. On behalf of our board of directors, I'd like to welcome you to our September luncheon, and thank you for being here. Some of you are here for maybe the first time. At least there are some faces I haven't seen here for a while. By way of background, we're a bipartisan nonprofit organization, a 501c3. We have a 10-member board of directors. We have 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats. We are actively recruiting a 5th Democrat and hope to have an announcement on that sometime soon. We've been around since 2013, and we really appreciate you coming here. We do a lot of lunch and learns like this, and we are pleased to have our distinguished panelists with us today, who David Adelman will introduce in a second. Before I turn it over to our panel, I just want to recognize a few people who are here, especially former Iowa Governor and U.S. Ambassador to China, Terry Branstad. State Representative Dan Gelbaugh is here. Grimes Councilwoman Jill Altringer is here. Windsor Heights Councilman Mike Libby is here. And former Des Moines City Council member Christine Hensley is here. If I left anyone off, I apologize. A couple of announcements before we kick it off. We have an event in Sioux City tomorrow, which we're really excited about. This is the first event that we as an organization have had outside of the Des Moines metro area. We have about 30 people RSVP'd for that event so far, so we think that's a good start, and we hope to replicate that in other spots around the state going forward as well. We also have a banquet coming up on Monday, October 28th, and we have not been cleared to announce yet that Israel's Consul General to the Midwest, Inam Cohen, is going to be our guest speaker. But as soon as they clear us to announce that, we will make sure you all know. Our guests today are several state legislators who recently attended a trip to Israel sponsored by a group called the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, which is a global coalition of more than 700 partner organizations and 3 million people from a diverse array of religious, political, and cultural backgrounds who have a common mission of fighting anti-Semitism. While our panelists are all Republicans, the panel discussion will be moderated by David Adelman, a Democrat who organized the exchange. David is a principal and counsel for Cornerstone, a bipartisan employee-owned consulting firm specializing in federal and state government relations, public affairs, and strategic communications, political consulting, grant consulting, and business advisory services. He'll introduce our panel here in a second, and about 5 minutes before 1, Tom Henderson will come up and close us out. Please join me in welcoming David Adelman.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Hopefully, this will be a interactive and interesting conversation for the next 60 minutes, talking about Israel, talking about anti-Semitism, and then also bringing it back to Iowa and the benefits and the relationship and the key alliances that Iowa has with the state of Israel. So as Charles said, I had the opportunity to bring 5 members of the Iowa Legislature, as well as 13 state legislators from across the country over to Israel in June. This was my first time back since October 7th, so it was impactful for me, but frankly, more impactful watching first-timers come to Israel and experience Israel through their eyes. Combat Anti-Semitism, as Charles said, is an organization that combats anti-Semitism. But before you truly understand how to combat anti-Semitism, you need to see and feel and experience where it originally came from. And obviously, Israel is a key component in that. And so this organization brings delegations to Israel to experience what life is like on the ground, meeting with regular Israelis, members of the IDF, as well as members of the Israeli government. So You do see 4 of the 5 here. Senator Dawn Driscoll from Williamsburg was not able to join us today due to a conflict, but she does send her regards. First is Senator Dan Dawson. Senator Dawson was first elected to the Iowa Senate in 2016. He resides in Council Bluffs, where he represents Pottawatomie County. He and his wife have 2 children, and in addition to his work as a senator, he serves as a special agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. He has also served the Iowa National Guard for 26 years, and Senator Dawson as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee and is also a member of Commerce, Judiciary, State Government, and the Veterans Affairs Committee. Dan also served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 tour in Iraq. Dan, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. Representative Austin Harris is serving his first term in the Iowa House. He was raised and resides in Moulton, Iowa, where he operates a family farm with his father. He represents Appanoose, Davis, Monroe, and Wapello counties. Prior to being elected to the House, he worked for U.S. Representative Marionette Miller Meeks, as well as serving at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Representative Harris serves as the Vice Chair of State Government and is the member of the Agriculture, Ways and Means, and Labor and Workforce Committees. Thank you, Representative Harris. Representative Carter Nordman was first elected to the Iowa House in 2020. When elected, he was the youngest member of the Iowa Legislature. He was raised in Adel and currently lives in Panora. He represents Dallas, Guthrie, and Greene counties. In addition to his legislative duties, he is a small business owner and financial advisor. Representative Nordman serves as the chair of the Education Appropriations Subcommittee and is a member of the Appropriations, Judiciary, Commerce, and Local Government Committees. Thank you for being here, Carter. And last but certainly not least is Representative David Young. Representative Young is serving his first term in the Iowa House. He was born in Des Moines and now lives in Van Meter, where he represents Dallas County. In addition to his legislative duties, he also works for Drake University. Prior to being elected to the Iowa House, he was the U.S. representative for Iowa's 3rd Congressional District from 2015 to 2019. Representative Young serves as the Vice Chair of the Commerce Committee and is a member of the Appropriations, State Government, and Administration and Rules Committee. Thank you, Representative Young. Thank you, panelists. So what I wanted to do is just kind of give you all a flavor of kind of what their experience was while in Israel. All but Representative Young, this was their first time in Israel, obviously for Senator Dawson, not in the region. So just kind of, if we can go down the line and we'll start with Senator Dawson. What were your main takeaways of your recent visit to Israel, and how did these insights compare to what your expectations were before the trip? Please talk about the day trip to the kibbutz and the Nova Film Festival as well as part of your experience.
Yeah, everyone hear me? Great. Well, thanks for everyone hosting us here today. This is kind of a neat little event. Most time we take trips, we soak it in and move on. But I think we all have a responsibility to, which is what the purpose is today, to kind of convey what some of the insights that we have. And I assume everyone here, most people have some vested interest in a strong U.S. partnership with Israel. Some people might be here just to learn a little bit more, right? That was kind of me when I went over there. I've never been to Israel. David mentioned before, we'll talk later on about it. I've been to the region 3 other times. But for the specific issue of Israel and what they've been going through specifically, and actually we probably should talk about it a little bit more. This trip was planned over a year ago. And we were going to go in December of 23 until October 7th happened. And that's kind of like a game changer a little bit, where our trip was then indefinitely postponed until we went here in this last June. But as someone who's just going to go as a spectator to learn about the region, to then putting on the hat of someone going and learning about an active war going on right now, what happened, that's a totally different perspective. And I guess my biggest takeaway, which I would pass along to everyone as someone who had very little knowledge or experience in that specific portion of the Middle East of Israel, is that the 2 big takeaways I leave with everyone is, one, if not the United States supporting Israel, there is a very real argument to be made that Israel would cease to exist. And that is something I think everyone, should very deeply hold to your heart. And I'm not trying to throw barbs, but I will be very personal about this, right? I didn't know a lot about the mechanics and like some of the cultural issues over there, but it really pains me to see some protesters outside who have clearly very little knowledge as to what's going on over there, and people who are literally fighting for their lives and their existence every day to basically minimize the conflict right now with a couple poster boards and some of the cute little slogans out there. My other takeaway is that it's a lot bigger than a Muslim versus a Jewish fight, right? Or Western civilization versus, maybe people historically have had some pockets in the area, with a Muslim one. We all have a common shared history, and anyone who's never been to Israel, I would highly encourage you to go, because it's hard to grasp that until you actually go there. This is not a land fight. This is a cultural fight, and this is a historical fight. But the Old Testament is all of our shared history for those of our believers of what denomination, right? From there forward, you split off into different sects of what you believe in. But that area of the world is the breadbasket of where we all have some commonality. And I think it would behoove us to all acknowledge that from whatever you believe to understanding that region of the world, to try to find that commonality, and then also be able to point out what is good and what is evil. Because there is good in this world and there is evil, and you will find it in no place more prevalent than the country of Israel, what's going on over there right now. So that's how I like to open my comments here, is that just, talking about all of our shared history and the good versus evil. And really we have to very respectfully convey the information as to what is going on over there, because there are people, as we just see pulling up here today, who are absolutely clueless, and they are literally on the wrong side of history and on the wrong side of that battle versus good versus evil. And it's painful to watch, knowing what we saw.
Right.
Well, I think Dan did a great job of summarizing that, and thank you for having us here today. Thank you, David, and thank you to the Welcome Committee across the street. My main takeaway from the entire trip, and I wasn't sure exactly what to expect because I have actually never even traveled outside the country before, so of course the best place to go is the Middle East, and what I was taken away by was how incredibly diverse the country is. You hear a lot of the rhetoric that that Israelis, the Jews, are just white colonizers from Europe. And I was surprised by the racial diversity of the country, the ethnic diversity of the country, and also the shared values that we have. While we were touring the kibbutz Be'eri that was attacked on October 7th, a village of about 1,100 people. Most of them have been evacuated and are living in other parts of the country or across the globe, but a few hundred have returned so far to start to begin the rebuilding process. And the village is just a few miles away from the Gaza Strip, and while we were there, you could actually hear the artillery shells that the IDF was launching hitting in Gaza. And it wasn't me, but it was someone else in our trip asked one of the survivors, what made you want to come back? Why live here? Why not go to Tel Aviv? Why not go somewhere else? And it's a legitimate question to ask, but the answer they had was fairly simple, which was, this is home. And it's the only place that they've known to be home. And they take great pride in where they come from. And I think that's something that we as Iowans have a connection to. I grew up in a small town, very similar to the size of the kibbutz. And of course, if something were to happen to it, we'd want to come back and rebuild. And I think the main takeaway that I had from it was the shared values that we have with the Israeli people.
Thank you, Dawson.
Just out of curiosity, how many people in here have been to Israel? So most everybody in here, great. Yeah, I would say my biggest takeaway, kind of what Dan and Austin just said was, well, I will admit that I was pretty naive about, what the Middle East was or what it was like. It's somewhere that I'd go back in a heartbeat. Israel is such a beautiful country, as all of you know. But to echo Austin's comments, you get a lot of similarities between a lot of places in Israel and small town Iowa. It's home for them. It's where they want to be, and that is why they're fighting so hard to keep it. And so I think they're a very proud people, and as they should be. So that was my biggest takeaway: is a lot of these places you went, a lot of the people you talked to, it's like you're back in Iowa. So beautiful country. Would go back in a heartbeat.
Representative Young.
Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I want to give a shout out to my mom and dad. I went to Israel with my father on my second trip. I've been there 3 times. And I also want to give a shout out to Rabbi Stephen Fink, who taught me a class at Drake University, Holocaust Studies. You gave me a B, but that's okay because that grade got me out of academic probation that semester. So I appreciate that. And that class was impactful for me. So thank you very much. Aside from what has been said, and I agree with all of it, we have to support Israel. For me, it's for a few reasons. One, I think we have a responsibility as a republic, as a democracy, to support other democracies. And Israel is in a very, very dark part of the world. They are the shining light in that region. And we have to make sure that the precedent is set that other democracies support other democracies and do what they can. And we need to put pressure on some of these other countries out there, other democracies, particularly in Europe, to step up as well and join in our efforts to do that. There's power in numbers. 2, it's important for me to support Israel because the Bible tells me to. My faith is grafted from Judaism, Christianity is, and those who bless Israel will be blessed. And I take that personally, and I see that also with our country. The United States should do everything they can to support Israel with Israel's permission and what they're asking, right? And then we will be blessed as well. Call that selfish? I don't know, but I think it's good for the world in general and just a good thing to do. My biggest takeaway, depending on the time you go to Israel and what's happening, this happening just months after October 7th, the resilience the Israeli people have, the determination they have, the unity they have, despite differences of opinions on how to get to the end goal of being secure and having that lasting peace. The threats we have here are nothing compared with the everyday threats that Israelis live under every day. We wake up and we wonder, oh man, what horrible email am I going to wake up to? Or is a storm coming in? Do we ever wake up and say, I wonder if my kids will be blown up at school today or hostages will parachute in? We don't think about those things. Our first world problems are nothing compared to what is being experienced over there. So the resilience inspires me. I didn't want to leave. I plan on going back. But I'm just honored to be with you all here today and share these experiences, and would love afterwards to hear about yours.
Thank you, Dave. So just to back up real quick, these legislators, along with the other 13 legislators, were on the ground for 6 days. Their home base was in Jerusalem, and we traveled down south into the Gaza envelope, experienced and walked through the Nova Film Festival, where children, young adults, were celebrating music, peace, and light, and also walked through Kibbutz Be'eri, where Representative Harris mentioned that there were 1,100 in population, and over 15% were murdered by terrorists on October 7th. We went into Tel Aviv and met with Israeli startups trying to find solutions to better the world. We met with members of the Knesset in Jerusalem, and we went north into a Druze village, similar to the Druze village that was attacked by a missile by Hezbollah that killed 12 kids playing soccer. And so it was really kind of a geopolitical crash course for a week with these folks. And frankly, it's probably a very overwhelming experience. But can each of you share a specific experience or moment in your visit that was maybe like an aha moment, or a individual that you spoke to that was the aha moment that you wanted to take back to your constituents in your district in Iowa and share with folks in this room? Austin, go ahead.
Yeah, there were several moments like that, but for the sake of time, I'll just share one. I think while we were there, of course, with the meetings that we had, meeting with officials, the tours, the business leaders, and of course the citizens of Israel who were there to kind of help guide us. In our conversations with folks outside of those meetings, whether it be on the street, at a restaurant, or perhaps an adult beverage establishment at night, we talked with folks who, for whatever reason, realized that we were from America. And they were extraordinarily grateful and moved that we were there, because they feel extremely isolated right now. And they don't feel like they have a friend in the world besides the United States. So for Americans to be there, it meant a lot to them. But through that, through those interactions, several times it came up what is happening on college campuses in America. And they are paying extremely close attention to what is happening in our news, in our politics, the demonstrations that are taking place. Maybe as Americans, we don't really pay attention to the rest of the world as closely as folks do to us, and we don't realize how closely they pay attention. But that was kind of an aha moment of why it's so important that at every opportunity we have to push back against anti-Semitism, to push back against the knuckleheads who are chanting from the river to the sea, and making sure that we're sending a clear message, not just here at home, but abroad, that America doesn't stand for this. And while we were there, one of the officials, I think when we were at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, brought this up. And one of our legislators on the trip made a comment of, "Oh, don't worry, that's a minority view in the United States." And their response to that was, well, that's like saying, don't worry, only 25% of your house is on fire. And so I believe anti-Semitism is a slow burning fire that we need to be pushing back against at every moment we have, not just for stopping it from the rise here in the United States, but also sending a message across the globe, but specifically to the people of Israel, to make sure that they know that we are standing with them and we are not going to stand with the rise of anti-Semitism.
And I just want to very quickly piggyback off of Austin's comments. I do think we need to give some recognition to our regent universities. When all this was going on around the country, Iowa State and UNI, I think, did a good job at saying this encampment stuff, this Hamas sympathizing protests, whatever you want to call them, is not going to happen here. And when it did pop up at Iowa, it was taken down almost immediately. So I do think we need to give them credit where credit is due. Might be some other things we need to work on, but again, credit where credit is due. The main thing that I think I took away, or the most profound thing, was the Nova Music Festival. And to me, I think it relates so close because I'm 26 years old, and a lot of those people would have been my friends and somewhere that I could have been. So I think if there's one thing I walked away with is how inhumane these attacks were and who they targeted was just sickening. And again, being a 26-year-old, somewhere I may have been, hit close to home.
I noticed upon arrival in Israel, there were the state Israeli flags everywhere, bumper stickers on cars, on shirts. Imagine looking around your towns, around Des Moines, and on every building, every house, there's a flag. The sense of unity and patriotism was really, really overwhelming. At first I thought, oh, the government gave everybody a flag and mandated they put it. No.
Just because they knew that you were coming.
Yeah, they got the memo. It reminded me a little bit after 9/11, when everybody, Republican, Democrat, Independent, flew the flag, the patriotism. Um, Unfortunately, after a while, that faded away in America. Not that we're not still patriotic, but that's not going anywhere in Israel. Those flags are staying up, and that resilience is always going to be there. A particularly impactful moment for me is when we went to Tel Aviv and we met with a nonprofit organization that worked nonstop to get the hostages back. And we were speaking with a young lady there, probably in her early 20s, and she had, I think it was just a friend who had been abducted. They were trying to make sure that they knew where that person was and could get them back. And we were in a glass enclosed conference room, about 15 to 20 of us. And all of a sudden, the young lady we were talking to really perked up and just looked over us all, and through the window to the entrance of the facility we were in walked a young man who had just been released. He was a hostage. And just that moment of sheer joy and praise on her behalf just really hit home. I mean, what the young man went through, and by the grace of God, he survived
Rescued by the IDF.
and was
Mhm.
rescued by the IDF and came back. That's not going to happen with all the hostages, as we have learned. That was just very impactful. Tell your family members you love them every day.
Dan.
I think the biggest aha moment for me would have been that Israel genuinely wants peace in the region, and a just peace, but they want peace. And it would have been our first day there. It was throughout the trip, but I'll talk about our visit to the Western Wall. And by the show of hands, most people have been around here, right? But it really struck me as, the most sacred site for the Jewish people is a site that, as in the Temple Mount, they cannot visit. It is controlled by the Palestinians. And the Jewish people have never asked for that site control and authority to be returned to them. They are willing to cede that to keep the peace in Jerusalem and to have a just peace with the Palestinians. And it kind of struck me a little bit, if you think about, I don't know what denomination people are, but I'm Catholic, right? So I'll speak from Catholicism. To go to St. Peter's Square or go to the Vatican, and to think that some different culture, different opposing ideology would come into the Vatican and seize control of the entire property and tell every Christian or every Catholic in the world, you will never be able to come in to the square. You never come in to visit this. The furthest you can go is on the exterior wall to make a prayer. That is very telling, right? But that goes to show how much the Israeli government wants a just peace. And there was examples throughout the trip when we went to visit the ancient town of Shiloh, right? That is when the site of the first tabernacles. And kind of talking to the archaeologists there, discovering it, like, this is just my words, right? But I would say that the excavation is probably going at a controlled snail's pace. And one of the problems is that if you look at this proposed two-state solution, that is a site that the Jewish government would have to cede to the Palestinian authorities. The more you dig, the more truth you find, which is going to cause the Jewish government problems. In fact, that how are they going to get peace if they have more of a historical tie? So I say all that was my biggest aha moment. This isn't one of these conflicts that have been going on for generations, or this isn't the Israeli people and government that are just trying to keep in mind, we talk about the Israeli government, there's a lot of Palestinians and Israelis that coexist together, right? When we talk about the two different governments over there, this is not just everyone always fighting or the Israeli government being rude. They are willing to cede so much of their history and the control just for a peace. And that was probably the biggest thing over there, really, when we talk about that good versus evil. There is a good and there is an evil.
So my next question, I'll provide a little bit of context first. So these legislators are in the room, and past legislators have done a phenomenal job in Iowa bringing awareness about Israel and anti-Semitism to Iowans. For example, this legislature in a bipartisan way passed the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. This legislature in a bipartisan way passed the anti-BDS law protecting investments and trade in Iowa. This legislature has passed resolutions regarding Jewish American Heritage Month, supported dollars to restore the Holocaust Memorial on the state grounds, mandated Holocaust education curriculum just this year. The governor has done multiple proclamations supporting Israel and Israel's right to defend itself. It illuminated the Iowa State House blue in a show of solidarity after October 7th. There's been a bipartisan bicameral letter supporting Israel that was dated October 13th, and Polk County passed a resolution supporting Israel as well. So on top of that, in what ways do you think your visit could help strengthen the economic and cultural ties between Iowa and Israel, in addition to what we're doing now, we're just educating people on this?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, I think we need to give a round of applause to David for all of his work at the State House and passing these things. So, I mean, really, a lot of this would not have been done without David's help. So it was kind of cool. We did a legislator round table towards the end of our trip with the other states. And on numerous occasions, they looked to Iowa and said, well, what did Iowa do? So I think we've done quite a bit here and we'll continue to do whatever we need to do. From an economic standpoint, I think one thing we discussed is ensuring that our Iowa Economic Development Authority is working with partners over in Israel to strengthen that partnership. So anything that we can do there, I think would be beneficial to both the state of Iowa and Israel.
You just. Our friends outside left, by the way. Apparently the TV cameras didn't show up and so nobody saw them. Yeah, the legislature is pretty unified in its support for Israel, and you've heard of some of the things that we've done. What more can we do? I would like to take a look at some, legislator or educational, whether that be professors or students exchange programs to build relationships, particularly those who are within government who may be at the same time in government and dealing with some of these issues and maybe being able to work on them eventually. If worse came to worse in Israel and people had to leave Israel, I would be in favor of making sure that we set some kind of system about where we would relocate Israelis here and even help pay for some of that relocation and set them up with families and make that a priority. I think that's important that we, after escaping the worst of the worst, and hopefully they don't ever have to leave, that there's safe havens where they can have a community where people support them as well. And to my Jewish friends, I think they know this, that some of your most biggest allies are evangelical Christians. And many of you are here right now, and we're unified in love for our Jewish brothers and sisters and support for Israel.
Yeah, when we talk about assistance to Israel, I think it's important to, and I think a lot of people here would understand this as well too, to go beyond just the military assistance, but to actually help the country develop and thrive and be as independent as they can, right? David knows this, but having been over that area of the world 3 other times, when I flew in there, the first thing that I still recall was like, my God, where all these trees come from. And it's the reality. You go to anywhere else in the area of the world, other than maybe some palm trees in Kuwait, there's not a whole lot of developed communities over there. And, just the history is that, you need wood in the wintertime or you need fuel, you go to cut down a tree, right? There's not a natural forestation program, everything like that. I say that to say that Israel is such a unique area in that world, because if you look at them geographically, they have no trading partners, right? Like all of their neighbors in some form or fashion want them destroyed, or at least to be not there, or at least not have the control that they do and everything. So Israel depends on other countries in the world to not just, for us to trade with, but for them to export some of their expertise and technology. I remember we were touring one company one day, and they actually provide not the traffic cameras necessarily, but there are DOT traffic pattern cameras, right? And we were looking at there was actually, I think, West Des Moines, some other company. I mean, we're looking in Israel, we're looking live at what was going on here, not just in Iowa, but some of our communities. And they're making cutting edge technology there, just trying to help mitigate traffic jams and clogs, things like that. There's so many more opportunities there that, like I said, it's such a jewel, not for just the history, but just for the economic opportunity. And the more that we can strengthen Israel, the more we better prepare them throughout the world. So when we do have those opportunities, mentioned here, IEDA and things along those lines, I think, if there is the way, we should try to figure out those ways there, because it does help both of us.
Yeah, I think something that we could do to enhance cultural ties with the state of Israel is try to establish some sort of exchange program. I mean, it's a great opportunity for legislators to be able to go there, and for everybody else as well. But the folks that I think that really need that type of experience are the folks we saw across the street about 5 years ago. They should have an opportunity before they buy into this mindset or this whatever you want to call it. An opportunity for at a young age, whether in high school or college or community college, to be able to travel to Israel and see firsthand the experiences that we had as well. So I think that'd be something that perhaps our education budget chair can help fund.
So I'm going to go back to Senator Dawson for this specific question. Just having been in the theater of war in the Middle East, you walked through the kibbutz that was ransacked on October 7th, and you walked through the music festival. And you also listened to soldiers that have been in Gaza and that have come out and that have been fighting. Can you explain, kind of from your perspective as a veteran in our country, what the Israelis, having conscriptive service, meaning that almost all except for a few exceptions have to serve, what went through your mind walking through that and having conversations with those soldiers? Just share a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah. As David said, I've been being deployed in Kosovo as well too, 4 different times, and 3 in that area of the world. There's the old saying that war is hell, and there is truth to that in a variety of ways. I would say what happened on October 7th, to use the phrase war is hell, would be it can't capture what happened there that day. And that's where I come back to, a lot of times the United States gets involved in conflicts. It's typically us trying to help one country over another country, or something egregious happening in the area of the world because of an aggressor's actions, right? What I saw over there is something I've not experienced that occurred on October 7th. I've not experienced in my previous deployments. Because what happened over there is that, and as everyone knows, just from a quick history recap, on October 7th was a specific date picked out from a historical context, with the hope that, Hamas would start a fight which would lead to a larger regional conflict, hoping that Hezbollah would come down from the north and have a multi-front war, right? That would be what you would see military war. But what happened during this was something that was far more scary and far more evil. Within hours of the Hamas militants punching through holes in the border with tractors and bulldozers and things along those lines and sending their soldiers in, they put a call out. And the call is basically on your radio, right? It's not like it was some military type of operation where some special operators decide to put this call out. It goes like a general public call. And what they say is they encourage all of the Palestinians inside of the Gaza to go into Israel and take hostages. And they were going to pay people for each hostage. And as we know the horror stories afterwards, that these hostages were brought back, they were brutalized, they were raped, and there's still over 100 hostages there today. You will be hard pressed to find a population demographic that's, I'm not just percentage wise in that area of the world, where even on the worst days of what we've seen the Russia-Ukraine war, you've never seen Russia encourage its citizens to go into Ukraine and pay each person to bring back a hostage for the most vile and evil purposes back in the territory. I've never seen that in Afghanistan. I've never seen it in Iraq. That's literally what happened there on October 7th. And that's what makes this problem with the hostages even more complicated now, because, that's a brand new flavor of war that the world has not seen, and that's the problem Israel has. If you reward with, a very gracious peace deal, do you incentivize further hostage taking, right? This wasn't something where Hamas militants just crossed the border in the town of Berea and start setting houses on fire and start executing people in the streets. That would be bad enough on a town with no military presence and just individuals. But the government and the people, and let's be clear, the immediate polls after October 7th, 80% of the Palestinians agreed with what happened on October 7th. So it's not something where we have this small little sect of government out here that's controlling its people and no one has any say. This is a mindset and this is an ideology over there. But when you escalate war to that effect, that you're putting an all call out for anyone to get in a truck, go across the breach and bring back the hostages that you can for the worst purposes afterwards, that's the good versus evil. And I've never seen that anywhere else in the world.
Thank you, Dan. Wanted to kind of have each one of you kind of give maybe a positive perspective of what you saw, something that was memorable, something that made you feel hope. Obviously, in addition to the flags and some of the other pieces that you talked about, just give kind of your final thoughts or some closing statements about the trip and about what you see as the future for Israel going forward.
Well, if you haven't been to Israel, try to find a reason to go and a way to go, and try to visit the whole top to bottom if you can. Dan, appreciate your service and your perspective on security, and it's hard to not ignore, what's going on with Israel and Bibi Netanyahu and their top military brass and what's the incoming trying to push them towards a certain direction with their foreign policy and dealing with the situation. But, this isn't just the proxies of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Shiite militia. This is about Iran, right? We know who's behind this. And there's a lot of pressure being put on by our country, a lot of pressure on Israel to do this, that, or the other. Israel should not be held hostage by our presidential race here in terms of dictating policy. We shouldn't do that. We should be helpful to Israel where they need help and ask for it and let Israel determine for itself the direction to go. And there will be consequences there, right? They're democracy. They have elections. If they don't like that direction, they'll change it. But U.S. pressure is misplaced and should be on not only Iran, but also Egypt right now. The tunnels that they found in the south, don't tell me Egypt was in the dark on that. We give Egypt $1 billion a year. And I certainly hope that those in Washington and Congress are reevaluating that funding. and putting some, attaching some strings to it and something really tight and ironclad to make sure that the players around there that we give aid to, they are on our side and they're not helping foment this disaster, this terror that's happening right now. Being at Drake University, I get concerned. We see what's going on at Columbia University, and I don't anticipate this happening at Drake University or any of our schools in Iowa. But you do wonder about what students know and don't know. And you see some of the social media going on out there. I taught a class last fall, and it was about current events. We talked about current events, our Bill of Obligations as citizens, our Bill of Rights, our history. And we talked about current events, and October 7th was in the middle of the semester, and invariably we talked about that. There's some really interesting perspectives and views, and unfortunately, Generation Z, the way they get their news is TikTok, Instagram, and X, and that's not enough. We have to have some real conversations, maybe some tough ones. But civil conversations, but being bold in our assertions and making sure they understand history and trying to put forth the Socratic method of thinking logically about this and not feeling your way through all this with images and sound bites. One of the signs out here said, "Stop the bombs." How about "Stop the hostage taking"? Where are those signs? The office I have is Dennis Goldford's old office. He's back here. I feel a little smarter when I go in that room. Did you still want that old McDonald's bag, Crum? I appreciate your service at Drake, but
Thank you, Dave.
yeah, we need to make sure that Israel determines for their own. We need to support where we can support.
Thank you. Representative Nordman, some maybe positive takeaways.
Yeah, I would, just a very quick story. And I think the Israeli people have so much resolve and again, so much love for their country and pride in it. When we went to the kibbutz, we met with a woman who kind of showed us around. And the very last place we went was her mother and father's house. And her mother and father were there, and I believe her brother. The brother and father went and hid while the attack was happening, and the mother met the Hamas members in the living room where she was murdered. And she took us to that house and stood right where her mother had lied dead. I think one of her cousins or another member of her family members were also taken hostage. Her being able to do that, I think, showed again how much resolve the Israeli people have. She is not leaving. She is rebuilding the village. She is ensuring that there's a place for her community members to come back to. And so I think that situation right there gives me the most hope, knowing that they're going to continue to fight. They're not going to let anything deter them from the state of Israel consistently being there. So the other thing is they are such an innovative country. And there are things that we can bring back here that can help a number of our rural communities. We got to see it firsthand, actually, when David saved a choking baby in the hotel lobby. They have a very smart EMS system where almost a volunteer group, someone comes and is there within. I mean, you've all seen it. You've all been to Israel. So just the innovation that they have, I know that they're going to continue to be successful. So the last thing I'd say is thank you to all you for continuing to spread the message of Israel. I mean, that's important too. As David mentioned, as Dawson mentioned, the things that are happening on our campuses and our younger generation really is sick and it's very misguided. So we have to continue to make sure that we are spreading what's actually happening and the truth. So thank you to you.
David did actually save a choking baby.
It was not scripted as part of the.
Yeah. I think they actually renamed the baby David. So the most hopeful part of the trip when we were meeting with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, one of the official officials that we met with gave a very eloquent speech. And in it, she said that Israel has a rendezvous with destiny. And that really connected with me because I think it speaks to how hopeful they are. They feel a sense of destiny. They know that they are supposed to be in their homeland and they have the homeland to take care of. And I wrote an op-ed in the Des Moines Register for anyone who read it that mentioned that if this is their rendezvous with destiny, then this is our time for choosing as individuals. And I think it's important for us as legislators who are there, but folks who have also been there, to go take that back to your communities, take it back to your circle of friends, to your family members, make sure that they see what you saw, and that we're going to be able to stand with our friends in Israel, that we're going to stand up to anti-Semitism, that it's not just enough to say that Israel has a right to defend itself, they also have a right to exist. And so seeing the hope and the sense of destiny that they have was I think the best part of the trip.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the comments that David made down there a little bit. I'll start off a little negative about and on the positive, what you asked about, things aren't great over there and they'll probably get a little worse before they ever get better, right? After we defeated Saddam's regime, we were basically fighting Syria and Iran and Iraq, right? Both times when we were in Afghanistan, we weren't fighting the Afghanis. We were fighting the Iranian-backed militants in that region. And the same thing for Israel. They're effectively fighting Iran through proxies, either Hezbollah or Hamas, right? So until the United States ever deals with Iran, we are always going to be in this stalemate of somewhat. That is pretty bleak. But where the positive is when we were over there, we did a variety of discussions, and one was on the Abraham Accords. And, Israel was this close to getting normalized relations with Arab countries in that world, which would have been the first time in their, for centuries history, right? Everything. So that tells me that even though Iran could flip a switch and Iran could help with their willing partners, Hamas and Hezbollah, cause the chaos and murder and evil that's occurring there right now, there are countries out there that do want to have a peace. Israel wants to have a peace. And as long as that equation exists, there is a chance for peace, and there is a chance for not only just a prosperous Israel, but a prosperous future for everyone that lives in Israel. That would be whether you're Jewish, that would be you're Christian, Muslim, whatever you might be. There is a chance there. And that's what gives me hope in the end. Despite the near-term problem, there are opportunities for a better Israel and a safer Israel.
Thank you, panelists. If we can give them a round of applause again. I know it sounds luxurious going to Israel for a week, but they all had to take time out of work to leave their families in order to do this. And this, I believe, I can say, has made them more well-rounded, more globally focused, and better legislators serving all of you as their constituents. And so really appreciate all of your support for them as they continue to try to make Iowa a better place. So thank you all. And I will turn it over to Tom to close out the lunch.
Well, thank you all for coming today. Thank you, David, for all of your help in setting up such a distinguished panel of legislators to talk to us today. David has always been one of our most trusted advisors for our organization and one of our best friends. And we always appreciate everything he does for us. With regard to this organization, we're also very blessed to have this occur at the Iowa State Bar Association office. They give us this facility for free. It's phenomenal for electronic setup and for parking, and we're very grateful to them for all they do. For those of you that don't know, maybe it's your first time being here, Iowans Supporting Israel is a bipartisan, nonprofit, charitable organization whose whole purpose and mission is to close the gap between Iowa and Israel and to provide steadfast support for the continued existence of the state of Israel. And our board is half Republican, half Democrat. My good friend and co-chair, Charles, is a Republican, and I'm a Democrat, and we actually get along. And all of our board members are of either one party or the other. We also have 4 different religious groups that are part of our board. Our board works so hard. Can I just take a second and have them just stand up and be recognized, please? For a nice round of applause. In addition to these monthly get-togethers that we have, which are free, we are going to have a banquet on the 28th of October. It's a Monday. It's going to be at Prairie Meadows. It's going to be a great meal and a short program. How many of you have come to the banquet in the past? Can I just see a show of hands? That's great. For those of you who haven't come, you need to come. I think when you go around the room, you'll see the leaders all around the state of Iowa that attend this, and we have a short program. It's not long, and it's really a meaningful evening. So I'd encourage you to come to Prairie Meadows. Cocktail party will start at 5:30 and then 6:30 for the dinner. And on behalf of our organization, I know all of you are praying for the hostages, but again, let's try to keep remembering them in our prayers as well as their families. Thank you so much for coming.